for most of us, we say that, the lives are more important than the economy because we know we'll find a way to fix these economic losses.
Hey everybody, I'm Will Glover, and today I am back here with senior writer from the Root, Michael Harriot. Michael, thank you so very much for taking the time out to talk to us today.
Thank you for having me again.
Let's just jump right into it. When you first heard about the protests happening here in Michigan, what was your first response? We have armed people going into the Capitol demanding things. What was your reaction to that?
Well, I had a couple of thoughts. First, I was wondering how it transferred from just open up the economy, which is kind of a legitimate beef, right? To like people with guns storming into the Capitol. So, the two things still don't converge into any logical thought to me.
When we're looking at this, we have guns going into the Capitol building, and one of the first thoughts that comes to people's mind is the phrase, if Black people did that. So what do you think about that phrase? Because I know that there have been other instances throughout history where, Black people kind of have done that.
When Black people almost did literally the exact thing in California in 1966, they passed one of the country's first comprehensive gun laws. And the president who did it was an avowed conservative, Ronald Reagan.
That was another thing I wanted to touch on, is the response to this seems a little bit different than it has in the past.
Yeah, it is different. We saw, again, people with guns that should only be used to hunt woolly mammoths inside the place where the legislators, convene and make laws. And we know that would have never happened had it been Black protesters. We saw in Ferguson, which I reported on Ferguson and was there, and I saw, Black protesters arrested because police said, well, that stick could be used as a weapon, and the stick was holding a protest sign.
So what does it say about the current state of things when you're seeing the different reactions when you have groups of people flocking to beaches and, hanging out in parks, and, the police are passing out face masks versus, some of the arrests that we've seen in New York, and how people reacted to house parties and people going to barbershops and things. What is your take on that?
Well, again, it's just emblematic of of the disparities in treatment between the Black community and the white community. When they pass out face masks at beaches and in parks, no one thinks that is a bad thing, because we think that people should be safe. But right. It's hypocritical to see that when they come into Black communities and with guns drawn for a house party, or when we saw the New York Police Department body slam a guy and sit on his face for filming them arresting someone for not wearing a face mask. When we see an Birmingham police officer in Alabama slam a woman in Walmart to the floor for not wearing a face mask. You see the disparities in those two kinds of treatment, and no one thinks that, we don't want white people to have face masks. That's not the point. It is the hypocrisy of the treatment between when white people decide that they want to do something versus when Black people decide the same thing.
That leads me directly to Ahmaud Arbery and this murder case. And, the way it's been handled has been questionable, to say the very least. So how does that event also coming to light at this time shift the feelings, the narrative, the conversations for Black Americans?
The Ahmaud Arbery incident happening at this time in the space that we're in kind of highlights the inane stupidity of the people who are protesting so that they could go get their haircut. And, and I think, again, I don't want to characterize their concerns as illegitimate, right? Because there are legitimate concerns. I think a lot of these states that are quote unquote opening up aren't doing so just because of the protests or for some semblance of freedom or liberty. It's because, states are going broke. But we see the disparity in those concerns, right? Because if they don't pay the police, what happens, right? Because we live in the communities that are over policed. We live in the places that need these government funds, but we want to live too. We want to be able to walk down the street. So the Ahmaud Arbery incident kind of shows how different these two Americas are.
When it comes to opening the economy and things like that, how do you feel about these arguments?
For most of us, we say that, the lives are more important than the economy, because we know we'll find a way to fix these economic losses, but you can't bring back someone's dead grandmother. And it's interesting to me because, what we're not talking about, especially in Black and Brown, when we refer to Black and Brown communities, is that, man, we're losing a generation of elders, right? We're losing our history and our culture. All those people who are dying in nursing homes, it's not just Black and Brown, but in nursing homes and in hospitals, they're disproportionately older and Black and Brown, and we're kind of erasing our history.
Is there anything else that you think we need to be addressing or looking at as we go through this, just in general?
Yeah, man, I think one of the other things that we are overlooking is the opportunity this crisis presents us to correct some of the mistakes that we've made and to give people, Black and Brown people, poor people, some equity, right? We can see that this crisis, this disease, is not just disproportionately affecting Black people and Brown people, but maybe poor white people who have been pushing for these austere economic policies will see the wisdom of their ways, because they need help too. Like, people in red states who are poor, who can't afford health care, are also being affected by this crisis. People are now unemployed. 20% of the country is now unemployed because of this. And a lot of those people were the same people who were against social programs, who were against government assistance. And now those are the same people clamoring for stimulus checks, which is government assistance. They're clamoring for their small business loans, which is government assistance. And we see that those loans and those stimulus payments are disproportionately going to white-owned large corporations. And hopefully this presents the opportunity to see that our government is just not a government of the people anymore. And maybe we can organize and fight to regain that.
You can find more at onedetroitpbs.org or subscribe to our social media channels and sign up for our One Detroit newsletter.